ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the world really come?
Sharing, even the police brutality one. There's that video I've asked many people, and they all saw it, of that old man getting shoved by the NYPD SWAT during the riots in 2020, and he had his skull cracked open and bled out of his skull and ended up dying. So that's an old white guy. That's, that's not a race. It was a big buff white SWAT officer against a little skinny old white guy. There's no racism there, but there's clearly a problem there. And so with that, and with all of my rhetoric, I really try to make it anti-tribal. So instead of all lives matter, Black lives matter, I say no cop should be allowed to abuse any citizen. And if they do, they should be held accountable. End of story. And black, white, brown, and in between, and tattooed up the wazoo, everyone. So right now I'm working I'm working with sponsored ballot petitions in California. So I'm out there in front of Targets and Walmarts talking to the general population of registered voters of all colors and backgrounds, and sponsoring, like, increasing funding for homeless programs, helping dialysis clinics get open. It's some cool stuff. I was blessed to get into that job when I was young, and then it's really, really doing well now. You can make a decent penny doing it. So I'm saying this exact stuff right in front of everyday Californians, not even just Americans, but specifically Californians close to the Bay Area. Stockton's right near the Bay Area, very diverse, lots of people of color. And they all are like, yeah, that's what it's about. And yeah, racism is also an issue, but it's about that. And that's how we solve it. That's how we should talk about it. Like, that's where most people seem to be. I was blessed with doing that job in 2010 before I was 18 years old, just before. So before I really got politically indoctrinated in any way. So I saw with proof that the average person agreed on everything. Good economy, low crime, cheap cost of living, freedom, leave me alone. We're Americans. Like, it's not actually that complicated what we all sort of are looking for in our politics. Now, the details require understanding and sophistication. You need to talk to economists and talk to biologists and talk to virologists and be informed. But we all know the North Star of what all these things are about. The gain of function stuff is a great example. We all can understand you shouldn't be tampering with viruses to make them more transmissible to humans. That's a very clear no-no. And I just heard this today, technically by definition, that is always a bioweapon, because whether you create a bomb to blow someone up or not, it's still a bomb.
It's still a bomb. Yeah.
Whether or not you're creating the virus for the purpose of sicking it on somebody is irrelevant to the fact that it is a weapon in and of itself. So that any of that stuff is all bioweapons research, basically, by definition. And that, that is a common sense, like, no, that's not okay. Let's ban that. Let's get rid of that. That shouldn't be okay. Most issues are like that. The only issue that I believe people truly disagree on is the abortion issue. That's the only one that's truly like your values, what you believe brings you down where you're going to be. There's a debate to be had, but that's the only one I don't think it's as easy to just, step into and have an easy conversation about, because it's all about how you're coming into it, almost 100%.
I agree.
Yeah. So what was your experience with the Clintons during those years? Because the truth is, like, there was a lot of backdoor subtle stuff that happened in the 90s that was maybe not so good, but the nuts and bolts of it was great. The Clinton years were good for America by all accounts and metrics. So I'd love your perspective on that time and what it meant for you.
Well, they were our governor as I was growing up. Right. We toured the home. I went to school with Chelsea Clinton. So Hillary was the president of our French club, and we all loved him. And then somewhere right before the presidency thing took off, a lot of problems started coming out. I guess during a campaign year, I was young, so I don't really know why it was coming out, but his brother Roger came into the media. And then there was the problems down in at the airport in Southwest Arkansas, where they were supposedly smuggling in drugs or whatever like that. And it started hampering with our mentality of how we saw the Clintons, period. But I didn't have a problem with them until the super predator bill. As a young thug getting in trouble, I was falling under this. But I think Bill Clinton rounded out his second term. Excellent. I think he said, okay, I'm messing up. I got to change some things. And I was late in my teens at that point, but I felt the difference in the second term than I did the first term. And, I was very young during that time. I'm a little older than you, but I'm not much older, I guess. But I had no problem with the Clintons, and I didn't. I wouldn't want to go back to them now, especially the one that's wanting to be in office. But I had no problems with Bill himself. I think he was very down to earth, and I had no problems with his policies other than the super predator bill. And that, listen, when I'm talking, I'm just firing up. I'm all over the place. I squirrel so fast, but I have all this in my head that wants to come out, but I don't want to shoot myself in the foot because I'm quick to squirrel and trip over.
You haven't stepped on your own foot yet. Everything you said was coherent. You were following a clear train of thought. So no Good. Worries, no concerns. Put yourself at ease. Yeah, I would agree pretty much in terms of what I understand of that era. He didn't make the things that I would disagree with in terms of what he did. Wasn't making things worse. It was just a status quo. He did improve a lot of things economically and in terms of our monetary policy and a few things like that. It was, high growth, low inflation time. And I despise. And so from 1998, Monica Lewinsky, I think that was when that happened, through 9/11, I would have been a staunch left winger throughout that time, because the scandal around a competent president having a personal affair, when you have any sense of American history, the fact that they made such a freaking
because that's all they had. That was all they had during his second term.
Yeah, that was all they had, and so it was just I think that time period between those two events is kind of when our country started to break, both in terms of the population, but also in terms of our politics, and certain policy markers. So from 1950 to 2000, our labor participation rate went up, which means of all the people that can possibly be working, what percentage is working. It's a great marker of productivity. It was going up for 50 years, except for under Bush Senior, because he was his own little kettle of fish there. But from 2000 through to 2017, it went down. So we went from a long period of the American people being sort of taken care of despite the system not being perfect, and there's lots of long-standing issues, to us basically just taking a backseat in terms of priorities, economically and otherwise. And we really started to eat out. That was when China entered the World Health or the World Trade Organization and started taking manufacturing over there. And their economy was at about 2.5–3 trillion in 2001. Now it's about 5 times that size, about 15 trillion, about 75% the size of ours, in such a short time frame because of the way they manipulated their relationship to our economy, and just good policies on their part that I would just say we should actually copycat and mimic, like the what is it called? Belt and Road Initiative, where China is investing in infrastructure in the third world, basically to help invest, but also to get sort of a debt-based kickback.
Right. We
should be doing that. We should be putting money out there, not for stupid aid and not for, wars, but just straight up we should have our own infrastructure taken care of. And then we should be going beyond that and be exporting that expertise and that, those companies, sending them overseas, growing it would only grow American business. It'd be, a version of exports. Plus, we export the financial assets of the debt on top of that, which is like, I've talked to a finance professor who's really, really good at expressing his expertise, but he tends to sort of get caught up within that framework and not see the real world anymore. Because like when I bring up certain things about the way China does, so they're like exporting more than they're importing, and they're like exporting financial assets too, in a certain sense with this debt and all that kind of stuff. Like he said that shouldn't happen, but that is a clear example of it happening. So that's its own little thing. I mean, this is nothing related to our conversation. I
I'm following
squirrel around, squirrel. Anywho, so they do a lot of good stuff, but because we've been intentionally crippled in America for a variety of reasons, and I could break down a few pretty quick. Economically speaking, we've been crippled. They were able to outcompete significantly with us. So our payroll taxes literally make it more expensive to hire, because you're paying, if you hire someone for $100, you're paying 7.65% on top of that as a business. And as the worker, you're paying that 7.65% as a flat income tax, which is its own issue if you believe in progressive, or even I believe in an alternate tax, but that's another discussion. We have a high corporate income tax, which is basically just a tax on doing business. Because like the corporate income is profit. It's either going to go to reinvest in the business, pay their people more, pay out dividends, or do stock buybacks, which creates capital gains, all of which gets taxed eventually. So it's like that, it's in that money in that account. And anytime it goes anywhere from there, it's either going to grow the economy or get taxed. So it makes no sense to have it taxed at that stage. And it only hurts, doing business. You're literally just increasing the cost of doing business, basically. And there's trying to think of another one, but there's a few others like that. The fact that we have chronically high or chronically fluctuating interest rates. So when you look at all the times the Fed has drastically raised the interest rates, there's almost always a crash shortly thereafter.
Correct. Right. Yeah,
no good
speed
reason.
Bumps in the economy so we can keep it.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, yeah. But it's designed to limit our competitive edge with the international capital pool. So there's all the money in the world is one giant investment pool, and that money is going to go wherever it's going to make the most money, and we're all competing internationally for it.
I don't understand why we had to tie a hand behind our back at any point during our fiscal growth. When we were on the world stage leading it, why we said, you know what, let's just tie our hand behind our back. Let's take a step back and let other countries come up. If we had invested in their infrastructure and they would have come up with us, I don't understand why we had to do the whole, let me step back behind the curtain, like the Grand Wizard of Oz over here. I don't.
Well, the truth is, wealth comes when policies are adopted. It doesn't come when trade is opened necessarily. Trade is like a backfill sort of crappy way of doing it, because it's like, yeah, you can go and make a lot of profit and definitely create a lot of growth in a system with unlimited slave labor. But is that what we want to be doing?
No, exactly.
Letting American jobs go over to slaves? Is that,
Literally.
we just decided to export slavery instead of actually getting rid of it.
And we're
That's pretty
smiling
much what
doing
we
it. They get on the TV smiling. Oh, we're moving our entire company to China. And how is that $12 phone costing me another $1,100 when it gets here? You know?
So we'll go into this. This is a great example of why moderate analysis matters. The concept of the minimum wage, when you raise it, that it will increase the cost of goods to such a degree that it outweighs that increase in the minimum wage. That's a BS line because the math doesn't work. They make up the math. If you ever hear one of these examples, Ben Shapiro included, he makes up the math. He'll be like, well, you see, if you have a barista making and selling muffins, and you pay her another $2 an hour, you have to raise the price of every muffin $2 to pay for that. And it's like, well, what if she's selling 4 muffins an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it's 50 cents each muffin, actually. And she has an extra $2 an hour, and that only costs an extra 50 cents. So she seems like she's actually better off in proportion. And the reason why that doesn't make sense is because when we go from no money, being a slave, to getting something, that principle would apply and just make the whole system fall apart. But it's like how it's your productivity versus your payment, not just the payment. So you can raise wages and have the productivity and the cost of those increased wages dispersed across all of the productivity and all of the products, like at Target or something. And now, as an example, let's say Walmart, let's say 15% of their bottom line cost is minimum wage labor. You raise it to 25%, that's only 10% more on their cost of production, 10% more on prices, and that's when we are only talking about raising the minimum wage, not just all wages altogether, So it's a dirty little trick that we have to have these little wages in order to grow the economy. That's not actually how it works. Economies don't truly take off in terms of the everyday person until you hit what's called labor scarcity, where you have more jobs than people, so that the employers have to start competing for workers instead of workers competing for jobs.
And when I lived in the desert during the oil field boom, I lived in West Texas. We saw that. McDonald's was starting off at $18 an hour with 2 free meals, and they would pick you up at home and offer daycare for your child. And they had to do that because the oil field was too good. The people that lived there was too scarce. The wives that came in with the oil field workers were not going to work because their husband's making $3,000 a week. So they had to pay well. And it wasn't just McDonald's, it was Shopko, and it was, all the other little stores around there.
Feel like I've been in a new mind state lately, but still in the same route. Always looking for a move, let's get to the money, see what we can bang out.